Welcome back to Live a Supercharged Life. Today we are diving deep into something that I think is so central to our happiness, and that is relationships.
Yeah.
But we're not just talking about the sunshine and rainbows, right?
Right.
We're going to get real about the tough stuff,
Yeah,
the toxic stuff.
absolutely.
And, this isn't just about romantic relationships either. We're
Yeah.
talking about any connection that leaves you feeling drained and just unhappy.
That's right, because sometimes relationships can feel more like an energy drain
Yes.
than a source of joy.
Exactly.
And recognizing those signs of toxicity is so important for protecting our own well-being.
It really is. And you shared an article with us titled, "Should I Leave a Toxic Relationship? 15 Signs It's Time to Walk Away." So clearly you're looking for some insights on this topic.
For sure.
So let's unpack this together and see what resonates.
Yeah, what I find really interesting is that the article goes beyond the surface level.
Okay.
It doesn't just say toxic relationships are bad, which we know, right? It actually digs into the psychological impact and explains how these relationships can actually rewire our brains.
Wow.
And affect our mental health.
Okay, so let's talk about that because
Yeah.
the article mentions increased anxiety, sadness, but it goes deeper than that, right?
It does.
It's that feeling of constantly being on edge, never knowing what's going to trigger the other person.
Exactly. That chronic stress that you're talking about can manifest physically too.
Oh, wow.
Maybe you're catching colds more often.
Right.
Maybe your sleep is all messed up.
Yeah.
The article really highlights how this mind-body connection is such a core element of toxic relationships
Interesting.
and how it can wear us down over time.
And then there's the whole self-worth piece.
Oh, absolutely.
It's almost insidious how a toxic relationship can slowly chip away at your confidence.
Right. And it's not always this dramatic in-your-face kind of abuse. It can be so subtle.
Right.
Like constant criticism disguised as helpful advice or backhanded compliments that leave you questioning your worth.
That's what really resonated with me in the article.
Yeah.
It breaks down these almost sneaky tactics that abusers use. And they even talk about gaslighting,
Yeah.
which can make you feel like you're going crazy.
Have you ever experienced that?
If sure.
Where someone twists things around, denies reality, and makes you question your own memories and experiences.
It's wild.
Yeah, the article describes this as a way for the abuser to maintain control
Right.
and to really make you doubt your own sanity.
It's chilling, and it's a clear sign that something is seriously wrong.
Absolutely.
And, the article goes on to list a bunch of other red flags like lack of respect, controlling behavior, constant drama.
And what's so interesting is how these patterns often start small.
Oh, okay.
Maybe it's a disrespectful comment here, a controlling action there,
Yeah.
but over time they can escalate and become so deeply ingrained in the dynamics of the relationship.
So how do you even begin to disentangle yourself from that?
Right.
Because the article talks about setting boundaries.
Yes.
But what if the other person just bulldozes right over them?
That's when it's really tricky, but the article emphasizes that setting those boundaries is essential,
Okay.
even if it's met with resistance, because it's about reclaiming your own space
Yes.
and asserting your needs.
It takes courage, though.
It does.
Especially when you've been conditioned to prioritize the other person's needs above your own.
It really does. But remember, you deserve to have your voice heard and your boundaries respected.
That's right.
And that's non-negotiable in a healthy relationship.
So true. And speaking of healthy relationships, the article talks a lot about the importance of trust and communication.
Think about it.
Yeah.
Does it ever feel like you're walking on eggshells, unsure of what will set the other person off? That erosion of trust that you're describing in the article really calls it out as a major red flag.
Interesting.
And when open communication breaks down, it's often the beginning of the end.
It's like you can't be your authentic self because you're always worried about the reaction.
Right. And that kind of environment breeds resentment and creates a huge disconnect.
Totally.
It's exhausting, and it's definitely not conducive to a healthy, loving connection.
So we've been diving deep into these signs of a toxic relationship, and it's pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But what's really striking me is how the article goes beyond just pointing out the problems.
Right.
It starts to offer some solutions, some ways to move forward.
Absolutely, and I think that's where the real empowerment lies.
I agree.
It's not about dwelling in the negativity.
Right.
It's about understanding the dynamics and recognizing that you have choices.
Yes.
You have the power to change the course of your relationship.
I love it. So where do we go from here?
Yeah.
What's the next step in this journey of understanding and healing? Let's explore that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
Sounds good. So, as we were talking about taking those first steps to move forward, the article really emphasizes the importance of understanding two key concepts.
Okay.
Codependency
Wow.
and trauma bonding.
Those sound intense.
They are.
Can you break those down for us?
Sure, so let's start with codependency.
Okay.
Imagine feeling like your whole sense of self is wrapped up in the other person,
Right.
almost to the point where you lose your own identity.
Wow.
That's a hallmark of codependency,
Okay.
and it can make leaving a relationship incredibly difficult.
So it's like you become so dependent on the other person for validation,
Yes.
approval,
Yeah,
that you almost forget who you are outside of that relationship.
exactly. And then there's trauma bonding, which is a whole other layer of complexity.
Okay.
It's what happens when you get caught in that cycle of abuse and intermittent reinforcement.
Right.
So there might be moments of love and affection,
Mm-hmm.
but they're mixed in with hurtful behavior.
Right.
And that can create a really powerful bond.
It's almost like you become addicted to the highs and lows, the drama of it all.
Yes.
And the article mentions this can make leaving feel nearly impossible, even when you know it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. It can, and it's like being trapped in a web.
Yeah.
And the article acknowledges that breaking free requires kind of a multi-pronged approach.
Okay.
It's about education,
Mm-hmm.
setting boundaries,
Right.
and seeking support.
And they even talk about creating physical and emotional space
Yes.
from the other person,
Yeah.
which I imagine can be one of the hardest parts.
It is, especially when codependency is involved.
Right.
But that space is so essential.
Okay.
It allows you to breathe, to reconnect with yourself,
Mhm.
to start to see the situation more clearly.
It's like taking a step back to gain perspective, to reclaim your power.
Precisely. And as you're creating that space,
Yeah.
the article stresses the importance of self-care rituals and developing those healthy coping mechanisms.
Okay, so what does that look like in this context?
Yeah,
Because it's easy to say practice self-care,
right.
but when you're in the thick of it, it can feel so overwhelming.
You're absolutely right. It's not about adding another thing to your to-do list. It's about finding those small things that nourish your soul, bring you back to center.
Okay.
Maybe it's a walk in nature,
Yeah.
listening to music that uplifts you,
Right.
journaling your thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
or simply allowing yourself a few moments of quiet reflection.
I love that it's about finding those pockets of peace and reminding yourself that you're worthy of care and attention.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that self-care isn't a luxury.
Yeah.
It's a necessity.
Especially when you're healing from a toxic relationship.
Especially.
You know, the article even had this quote that really resonated with me and says, "The greatest act of self-care is to reclaim your life from the people, places, and things that don't serve you anymore."
Oh, that's a good one and such a powerful reminder.
It is.
And it leads to another crucial point the article emphasizes.
Okay.
Safety.
Right.
Especially if there's a risk of violence or abuse.
Mm-hmm.
It's vital to have a plan in place.
They talk about practical steps like securing important documents,
Yeah.
changing locks, informing trusted people about the situation,
Yeah.
even contacting law enforcement or domestic violence hotlines if necessary.
It's a stark reminder that safety should always come first.
Absolutely.
And, there's no shame in seeking help,
Mhm.
reaching out for that support when you need it most.
It's about prioritizing your well-being above all else.
Yes. And the article also talks about rebuilding support systems,
Right.
which can be so incredibly difficult after a toxic relationship.
Because those relationships can really isolate us from our friends and family.
They do.
But rebuilding those connections, surrounding yourself with people who love and support you, is such an important part of the healing process.
It is. It's like finding your tribe,
Yeah.
those people who lift you up and remind you of your worth.
Exactly. And along the way, it's crucial to be patient with yourself.
Oh, for sure.
Healing is a journey, not a destination.
Yes.
And the article stresses the importance of self-compassion throughout that process.
It does.
So instead of beating ourselves up for staying in a relationship too long,
Right?
or for feeling confused and hurt, we need to offer ourselves the same kindness and understanding
Yes.
that we would offer a close friend.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all human. We all make mistakes and we all deserve compassion,
Yes.
especially when we're healing from something as painful as a toxic relationship.
That leads perfectly into the next part of our deep dive,
Oh.
where we're going to explore the concept of self-compassion in more depth. Welcome back to Live a Supercharged Life. As we're wrapping up our deep dive into toxic relationships, I want to kind of circle back to something we touched on earlier, which is this whole idea of self-compassion.
Yeah.
It's so easy to be hard on ourselves,
It is.
especially after going through something difficult.
It's like we almost internalize those negative messages we've been hearing.
Yeah.
And that inner critic just keeps replaying them on a loop.
Totally. But the article makes a powerful point. Self-compassion is so crucial for healing and moving forward.
It is.
But what does that actually look like?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes self-compassion gets confused with letting ourselves off the hook,
Right.
making excuses for bad behavior.
That's a common misconception.
Yeah.
Self-compassion isn't about denying responsibility or ignoring the consequences of our actions.
That's
It's about
a-
recognizing that we're human,
Right.
we're imperfect, and we all make mistakes. And instead of beating ourselves up,
Yeah.
we offer ourselves the same kindness and understanding that we would offer a close friend.
So instead of saying, I'm such an idiot for staying in that relationship for so long,
Right.
it's about saying, hey, I was hurting, I was doing the best I could at the time, and I've learned a lot from that experience.
Exactly. And, the article suggests that practicing self-compassion can actually help us rebuild trust and self-confidence.
Which can be so deeply eroded in a toxic relationship.
They can.
If you're constantly bombarded with criticism and negativity, it's easy to start to believe those messages
Yeah.
and doubting your own worth.
Right. But when you start to treat yourself with that kindness and understanding,
Yeah.
you're essentially rewiring your brain. You're replacing those negative messages with positive ones. And that can have a profound impact on your overall well-being.
I love that it's like taking back control of your own narrative of how you see yourself.
Absolutely. And while the article doesn't go into specific techniques,
Yeah.
there are so many resources out there for cultivating self-compassion,
Right.
mindfulness meditation, journaling, gratitude practices, even simple acts of self-care,
Right.
like taking a warm bath or spending time in nature, can all help nurture that inner sense of kindness.
So it's about finding what works for you
Yeah.
and being patient with the process. There's no quick fix here.
Yeah.
It takes time to unlearn those old patterns of self-criticism and replace them with these new habits of self-love.
And that's something I think we all need to hear, especially after experiencing a toxic relationship.
Right.
It's okay to be gentle with yourself. It's okay to grieve the loss of the relationship, even if it was harmful.
Right.
And it's okay to take all the time you need to heal.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I think that's the message I want to leave our listeners with. Remember, you are not alone.
You're not.
There's no shame in struggling with the aftermath of a toxic relationship.
Absolutely not.
And there is hope for healing and growth.
Absolutely. Surround yourself with people who love and support you. Seek professional guidance if you need it.
Yes.
Most importantly, be kind to yourself every step of the way.
Yes. Thank you for joining us for this supercharged deep dive into toxic relationships.
Of course.
Remember, even in the darkest of times, there's always a spark of light within you waiting to be ignited. Keep those supercharged vibes flowing, and we'll see you next time on Love a Supercharged Life.